I can't control God.
It's a risk you take, you know?
I can't control the wind or God. So then
5 seconds before.
then I will call out the tour director. But I'm just saying that if the wind blows, there's nothing I can do about that. I can't control God. Talk to him.
Hello everybody, welcome back to the Body Serve. I'm Jonathan.
And I'm James.
The US Open is over, it's done. 3 of the most remarkable weeks in tennis history behind us.
Most brilliant, he said.
That was the guy who presented something.
Not just the guy,
What?
the CEO of the USTA.
Okay.
You know, they're a little hyperbolic. But the US Open did see its highest ever attendance, I believe. It's the first time they've ever reached 1 million attendees.
Again, not something to be celebrated.
No, I'm just putting it into context. Overall, you know, I think after some of the fireworks of the first week, the tournament it didn't end on the most exciting note on either sides of the draw. And I'm not talking about the winners, just sort of the circumstances and the quality of the matches.
It was one of the most boring slams start to finish that I've ever watched. You're talking about fireworks in the first week. You're talking about 2 big upsets. That was it.
Yeah.
Outside of that, the first few days of the tournament were dry in weather and substance. It was a slog for me personally. It featured some really horrendous happenings off court behind the mic from some of the commentators. It was a mostly unpleasant experience. I'm not going to sugarcoat it at all.
All right.
And the one narrative that dominated the second week was the potential for a first US man since Andy Roddick to win a slam. And even that fell flat on its face today, at least. And for me, it only would have risen to the occasion had it been Frances Tiafoe.
Yeah.
And that didn't happen. And so, yeah, that's where I am with my quick 1-minute synopsis of this tournament.
I had a feeling that after some of these upsets, and it looked like there were numerous chances on the men's side, I just had a feeling that Sinner and Sabalenka would win this title. There'd be that symmetry of them winning both hardcourt slams this year, which is very rare. They were just the best hardcourt players of the year.
They won the tune-up in Cincy ahead of the US Open together as well. It was, in a way, destined for them this year.
Aryna beat Jessie Pegula in Cincinnati, and she beat her here in the final. Huge result for Jessie, first of all, to get past a quarterfinal for the first time in 7 attempts, making the semis, and really acquitting herself very well in the final. I thought she played a great match. Of the women at the top, she might be one of, if not the best player at absorbing pace, at just dealing with that battering she was getting, because Aryna is smacking the hell out of the ball. And Jessie just got a lot back, really deep too.
On hard court, she proved herself the second best player this summer. She won in Canada. She was runner-up in Cincinnati and runner-up again at the US Open. This after parting ways with David Witt earlier in the year, her game, her results fluctuating a bit, not really being the steady Eddie that we're used to. And then she turned it around in the summer months. Mm-hmm. The final was pretty much as good a 2-set match as you'll ever see in a final, given all the circumstances.
I thought it was fun. I actually thought it was a fun final. Jessie broke early, and it seemed that Aryna was a little bit nervous, but Aryna was able to get that back, and that seemed to snap her out of it, to really get invested. She knew what she was going to be dealing with the crowd, and I think, she's been talking about it nonstop for the whole year, and I don't necessarily like that. I feel like some of the commentators have started to use that as an excuse or a way to belittle Coco's win last year. But yeah, the crowd is a factor in the US, no doubt about that. But Aryna then reels off 4 straight games, but then she's at 5-3, serving for the set, and gets broken. The match, despite being straight sets, featured a ton of big momentum swings, more than usual.
She can make that argument about the crowd. You can placate her on this podcast. But she has been the best hardcourt player for a while now. And she's had multiple chances in slams to win much more than she has. And it's often boiled down to her not being able to get out of her own way.
Oh,
and
yes.
That's what was missing last year in conjunction with Coco's doggedness.
Exactly. I think if you believed that, you would have to ignore like the years of Aryna's kind of mental struggles at those later stages. And especially at the US Open. Losing, in 2021 to Leylah Fernandez. And she's had so many near misses here that this obviously meant a lot to her to get the US Open title.
Pegula, had she won this tournament, it would have been one hell of a run to the title. Starting in, well, I'd go as far back as the second round, taking out Kenin in straight sets. Then she beats Deanna Schneider in the fourth round, one of the hottest players on tour for quite a while now, beating Swiatek in the quarterfinals, coming back from looking completely lost against Karolina Muchova in the semifinals to turn that Titanic back around. And then had she come through Sabalenka, the best hardcourt player on the women's tour in the final, that would have been a hell of a run.
Yeah. Just the quality of opponents was really high. The match against Iga was not playing at a very high level. She looked pretty miserable for a lot of the match. And you saw just a lack of being able to think through this match independently. I don't know what's going on with her team. You know, one of the commentators said, I've never seen Daria, her psychologist, so quiet. Like, she's always sort of coaching during matches and she didn't say boo. So I don't know what's going on. That's none of my business. But it was a fairly miserable exercise. But for Jessie to beat the number one player and then get Muchova, who was a semifinalist last year, I actually thought it was unlikely. But I did think she had a chance in the final.
For Sabalenka, it's her third career major, twice at the Australian Open, and now at the US Open. When you look at her career statistics on Wikipedia, you know, those little boxes with the colors and whatnot, she is the most consistent player on tour over the last 2-3 years on these big stages. She just hasn't been able to get over the hump as often as she would like or as often as one would expect her to. In this match, we got some weird narratives from the commentators. Somewhere through the second set, we heard about how Jessie Pegula plays with a blue-collar work ethic. They tried to paint her as something other than the daughter of a billionaire. And I mean, we've seen this from the start of the tournament. These videos that Jessie put out where she's riding the train. This narrative was building, right? Mm-hmm. She's not your average heiress.
Right. She's not Siobhan Roy, right? She's not taking a helicopter into Manhattan.
And we're not here to say that Jessie Pegula is an awful person, that she's an evil, maniacal billionaire daughter. That's not what we're saying. But it felt like that narrative was trying to push back against that perception. Also, if people don't want to stan or root for the daughter of a billionaire, there are many valid reasons why that would be the case. And it just is a fact of life. It's something that Jessie has to deal with. And it's not something that commentators need to try and overcome for her. It just feels pushed and cringe, really.
Because what do you do? This slam seemed to be the moment where a lot of people, it dawned on them that there are like two daughters of billionaires in the draw and they're going far.
And then they discovered Taylor Fritz.
Oh my God, right? Yeah, this concerted effort to make Jessica Pegula seem working class, like billionaires are just like us. It's so weird. And honestly, there's nothing weird about hating billionaires. Actually, I would even argue that it's moral.
And then once Aryna won, we have Chris Fowler building this narrative of all the things that she's overcome, and including the fact that her ex-boyfriend died by suicide in March at the Miami tournament.
Right, but he didn't say that.
He didn't say that, but it was alluded to, and it just felt weird.
It was very awkward. I mean, we've purposely not spoken much about her personal life or most players' personal lives because we don't know what went on in Miami. This is a person who has children. Like, I just don't want to talk about it. But I don't know, it felt so shoehorned.
Right, and also it's only in service of this sporting narrative that must be created when somebody wins or does something good to then delineate all the things that they overcame. right? It didn't feel in service of Aryna necessarily. It felt like I must create this trope.
And Jessie overcame, I guess, the prevailing laziness of the upper classes. I mean, that's what it's feeling like. There's so many billionaire defenders on Twitter who say, why is the go-to line, if I were rich like her, I would just be on a beach somewhere. Like, okay, she has a job. She's doing something that she loves. And I think actually most people, regardless of their level of wealth, want to be doing something rather than laying around. I don't know why that is virtuous.
I mean, I've done enough in my lifetime. I'd like to lay around right now. But we see this also with that guy, right? Whenever he wins something or is in a position to do well, we get these commentators bringing up this abstract thing that he's overcome as well. I'm not saying what Aryna went through is the same, but it has to come out at this point because then it serves that purpose. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, how many of them spoke to it specifically over the last 3 years while it was happening?
You could count on one hand.
How many of them are sitting happily beside Nick Kyrgios throughout the last 2 weeks without saying anything, watching what he did this tournament on Twitter, and then sitting beside him the next day, having nothing to say?
Mm-hmm. Emma Navarro's rise has actually benefited Jessie Pegula because the latter is less of a target now. It's like there's a new, less likable billionaire heiress who we can, send all of our hate to.
And Jessie becomes the likable heiress now.
Right.
And when you find out how Ben Navarro made his money and continues to, then it becomes, well, is it predatory lending or fracking? Which is the worst?
Right.
Which is the worst of the two?
Jessie's family, they are selling off land for fracking, and they've made a gazillion dollars on oil and gas. Ben Navarro is, as the head of Sherman Financial, one of the largest purchasers of consumer debt in the U.S. And you know what that means. When a company buys consumer debt, they collect on the debt. Mm-hmm. That is the purpose. So he's a debt collector, a billionaire debt collector. And Sherman Financial was actually famous for, during the COVID pandemic and the lockdowns and the unemployment, they ramped up their debt collection activity and lawsuits when many other companies were slowing down.
They also specialize in giving credit cards to people with low credit scores. That's fun.
I did not know when I was in Charleston that this is what Credit One does. Like, this is their business model.
They're known for its predatory fees for, quote, express payments, which are basically regular payments. They charge for a credit limit increase, and they have high annual fees.
That's absolutely wild. You can charge these things because you convince people who have poor credit that you can't go anywhere else. So if we're giving you a gift, basically, by giving you a credit card, if you want a limit increase, you have to pay like $24.95. Have you ever heard of that? I'm glad that this is coming to light because I think there's this myth in like American capitalism that billionaires kind of built something and they should be rewarded and celebrated for it because they must have worked so hard to reach this, or they must have invented something really cool, or we must have benefited as a society by their toil. But a lot of them are actually just frackers and debt collectors. And again, I'm not saying that Emma and Jessie are evil and you should hate them, but I am saying if somebody chooses not to root for them because of their wealth and privilege, that's totally normal. That's a totally valid reason not to be a fan of someone.
As for Sherman Financial, they dealt with numerous lawsuits around their predatory debt collection practices. They were found liable in 2022 for pursuing payments from 288,000 customers whose debts had been discharged through bankruptcy proceedings.
Yeah, so just like a lot of nice stuff. Anyway, Emma Navarro made the semifinals. Mm-hmm. That was the headline.
Continued her great year. She gave a good account of herself in that semifinal against Sabalenka. The score in that was 6-3, 7-6 Aryna.
Yeah, I mean, Emma had a great run. Like, she bettered herself at every slam this year, right? She reached one round further in every slam of the four.
She beat Coco again in the round of 16 like she did at Wimbledon. She also featured in that quarterfinal match against Badosa, where I feel like a lot of us, based on how Paula has been playing the last few months, expected her to win. Mm-hmm. And Emma goes ahead, wins the first set. Paula gets up 5-1 in the second set. And it feels, I'm sitting there watching that match, it feels like Paula has figured something out. Something in this match has clicked for her and she's solved the puzzle. And what happens? You end up witnessing one of the most uncomfortable collapses that you'll ever see. There's another C word that you can use for it. I'm hesitant to do it because it's so unkind to the person who's had to go through it. But Emma ends up winning it 6-2, 7-5, winning the last 6 games of that match. It happened so quickly, and it was, quite frankly, horrendous to watch.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what it feels like as a player when you're like watching it slip away and you should have won, 10 minutes ago. Sabalenka took care of Zheng Qinwen very easily in the quarterfinals. They, of course, played in the Australian Open final, and that was a pretty straightforward match as well. I enjoyed the rematch of Zhang and Vekic in the round of 16. That was the Olympic gold medal match.
Watching that match, it gave me hope for Qinwen against Sabalenka.
Yes.
Because she was killing it from the ground. She was blasting the ball. Her serve was on point. When her first serve is firing, she can hit it like anybody else on tour. And so that quarterfinal result was a little bit disappointing for me. I mean, obviously emblematic of Aryna's prowess as well on the surface. And she also does not lose before the semifinal round anymore. She doesn't do it, and it's not happening on hard courts. She's become immune to early round losses in slams these days.
Yeah. In 2023, she made the semifinals of all of them, I believe. But she had these missteps. You might call them chokes or whatever, but Muchova...
I just said I would not call them chokes.
Okay, one might. It was the impersonal tense. Against Muchova and Roland Garros that year, but she's gone from a player who had service yips, who was kind of seen as an underachiever at slams, to being the most consistent at majors on the entire tour, and now the holder of 3 slams. And honestly, she should probably have 6, given her talent and her game.
Qinwen and Vekic was one of the best matches of the tournament. It was so high quality until like midway through the third set.
Yeah, it was very clear that Donna was just like pooped. Her energy was really low and you kind of knew where it was going. But Donna is tricky because she kind of always looks like that. As you have said, she always looks like she's dying on court.
Like she's going through it.
Right. But this one, it was clear she just did not have the energy in the third set.
Goff Navarro. This was 19 double faults from Coco Gauff.
Yeah.
It was not good.
No, I mean, I don't know. It's like, I'm glad you reached the round of 16 in your title defense. It's not embarrassing to lose in the round of 16. And it's not embarrassing to lose to Emma Navarro. But I'm worried that this is becoming a matchup problem, first of all. And secondly, I'm just worried about technique, as is Rennae Stubbs.
I mean, the matchup problem is not a concern for me because I do not see Emma Navarro being a top 4 player extendedly for the next few years.
Well, sure, but okay.
I may come back to eat those words, but the main issue here is the serve. Because... we still saw the fight. Coco came back and won that second set when it looked like it was going to be a straight set affair. And then the serve just deserted her repeatedly in that third set, the entire match.
Do you want to talk about Rennae and Brad now? Or
Sure.
Okay, makes sense.
I have here written on the agenda, Rennae cooks Brad on air to his face.
Rennae Stubbs, commentator on ESPN. Brad Gilbert also commentates on ESPN, but he is, of course, Coco Gauff's coach. Brad, a number of coaches in the past have taken on these dual roles. And even while their player is actively in the tournament, they're also commentating. And it's weird. It's just a weird quirk about tennis. It's clearly a conflict of interest.
At this tournament, Pam was doing it with Vekic. During that match against Qinwen, it was a second match on. They played well into the night. And at one point, because there was nobody really in the stadium, well, not at one point, for the majority of the match, all you heard was Pam's voice.
Yes, and it's so strange that you
Yeah.
usually hear her voice in an official capacity as a commentator, but we are hearing her as like a cheerleader and a coach.
And then the other notable coach commentator is Darren Cahill, who we've talked about his conflicts recently with the Sinner doping fiasco. He was in the box today for Sinner winning that tournament.
Right. Now, with Brad and Rennae, I think that when coaches who are also commentators go on the panel of these people who are probably their friends, at least their colleagues, and they know this job well, they probably think they're going to get a softball. And Rennae was not having it. Brad was going on about how this isn't discouraging and everything's looking good in practice. And she was like,
He wasn't going on about anything. It was a lot of hemming and hawing and not speaking. He was stumbling over himself. He couldn't get one coherent thought out. To me, if I'm in that position where I'm going to occupy this space that intrinsically puts me in a conflict of interest, if I'm the coach and I come to set in that scenario, I want you to come at me hard, because that is the only way I can at least try and defend my integrity to the utmost, right?
Sure, yeah.
I can kind of inoculate myself a little bit against these charges of conflicts of interest if it's not seen that you're taking it easy on me, that I'm able to operate in all these multiple spaces and not really be held to account properly. This is what Rennae did here. She called bullshit on a lot of things that he did and said, pretty much, it's just not good enough.
well,
Brad.
she said several times that when the pressure is on, bad technique breaks down. She wasn't accepting that, okay, things are great in practice and she's just getting nervous or whatever. She said the root cause is that there's bad technique. And he didn't really answer that charge. I don't think it was that bad, honestly. Like, she wasn't mean about
she was
it
not.
at all. And
She said multiple times, I hate to say it, Brad.
Right.
But, she was very calm with him, but very direct.
I think she felt like, okay, I have to be 100 about this because I know what I'm seeing.
And I'm hearing the bullshit.
Right. And Brad, unlike Darren, is not the most articulate messenger. Right. And that's part of his shtick. That's part of his appeal. But I don't know. I just wonder, like, what are they doing in practice?
You told me during the early rounds of this tournament that the coaches are given all these high-tech tablets with all manner of info and graphics and charts and analysis. And Brad is like, oh, I don't use that. I don't know how to read it.
I don't know how to use it. I'm like, okay, that might be cute. That might be your brand as a commentator or as like a person around tennis. But now you have a real job and people are picking apart your player's technique. And of course, there are mile-high expectations on Coco. And I think a lot of these criticisms are unfair and a little bit overblown. But Rennae was right. And I don't, it frustrates me that, okay, you get to double dip as a commentator and a coach. Well, you can't have your cake and eat it too, right? You also have to take the blows.
You could also make the argument that it's unfair in a sense to Brad, because when there's a coach who's not a commentator and their player has a bad result, they're not on ESPN most times.
Right.
So is it that Brad's contractually obligated? What role is he there in? Is he there because ESPN wants him there as a commentator, or is it just, well, sorry, Brad, this is just the way it plays out. Like, we're going to be ambiguous and vague about it, and you're going to be in that seat, and it's going to be uncomfortable, and we're just going to try and muddy our way through it.
Right. And it's not our fault that it's vague.
No.
Right. The responsibility is on them.
Coco said that she wants to take a training block. There was no excuses from her with this. She knows she has a lot of work to do. She wants to take a training block, work on things, and then come back again next year. She doesn't know what her schedule is going to be for the rest of the year. But I'm very curious to see how this plays out.
Yeah.
You feel that Brad should no longer be the coach.
I do, but I'm not an expert and I'm not in the camp. And I do know that the Goff family, I think, really does have Coco's best interests at heart. I think they're some of the best examples of tennis parents you can see, So I hope that, I hope this doesn't get toxic. And I hope that if the attention on her and the criticism gets toxic, I hope she can remove herself and do what she needs to do.
Where does this leave us in women's tennis now after this tournament? Anything different in the way you view the WTA and its players? Like the The state of the race, the state of the union, the state of the WTA union right now.
Right. Well, I think we clearly have the two great players at the top. I don't think that has changed very much. I think Iga is getting a lot of criticism for being a clay specialist, which I think is very untrue. But her performance at the non-clay majors over the past 2 years, I think does ask some questions, at least. But I went through most of the year just believing in my bones that Iga was the best player in the world. Like that it wasn't really even close. Now, Aryna has a good chance to finish the year at number one. She has been number one before. Honestly, I would say Jessie Pegula reaching this late stage was the biggest revelation for me.
Despite having won Toronto?
Yeah, because she's won a Masters before. That wasn't a first-time thing. She had never gotten past the quarters at a major, and I wasn't convinced that she ever would. How about you?
I think that Iga can win at the Australian Open, at the US Open. But the problem here is that I feel that Aryna is that much better than her on those surfaces now. So I think we're heading into an era, maybe in 2025, where we do have surface specialists at the slams. Iga's gonna Iga at the French Open. Aryna has made Rod Laver Arena her backyard. So then it becomes who's stepping up to the plate at Wimbledon to win.
Yeah, I think I would like to see the matchup more in slams, but Aryna is not mentally infallible, and that's what gives Iga an opening.
Right, but the more she wins in these situations, is the more immune she becomes to these mental lapses.
Yeah,
And she's shown now that she's able to overcome these moments within matches, because she could have easily gone away when Jessie was turning that match around, leading 5-3 in that second set.
right.
I do think Iga should be worried. That's my bottom line.
Okay.
On the men's side, Jannik Sinner, like Aryna Sabalenka, bookends the year by winning the Australian Open as well as the US Open.
Beats American Taylor Fritz in straight sets, and I just got to tell you, I was not excited for this final. I did not enjoy it. I don't dislike Jannik. I don't get it. I don't see it. It's just not giving very much excitement to me.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, a phenomenally talented player. Mm-hmm. In this matchup, I would say 3 times better than Fritz in almost every regard. I don't think you could see a matchup that was so clearly lopsided with so few escape routes for Taylor Fritz.
Yeah, because Taylor has beaten a lot of top 10 players recently, and he's improved quite a bit especially in movement, but in a lot of areas. Like, he is consistently a much better player than he was.
Right, but you improve your biggest weakness, and then across the net is somebody who moves like a gazelle.
Mm-hmm. Somebody who moves better and does pretty much everything else better.
Not just moves better, but moves incredibly better than you do. And with Taylor so unwilling and uncomfortable to come forward and move toward the net, not just talking about volleying, but just progress naturally toward the net instinctively, it was a non-starter. Mm-hmm. That is the thing that he needs to work on most, in my opinion. Because there were so many moments where he could, even if he weren't to move forward and finish the point by taking the ball out of the air, at least have the confidence to know that he will get the next ball to win the point. That did not feel to be the case. He got there eventually in the middle of the third set to be able to win a couple points in that fashion, but it still didn't look comfortable. And like Pegula, in what would be the final straight set of the match, he claws back. He goes up 5-3, like Jessie did. And just like Jessie, he loses every other game going forward.
Yeah, Jannik's game is one-dimensional, right? He doesn't actually need to do those things that you recommended Taylor does.
But he does.
He does, but it's mostly just baseline power hitting. That's what we're getting. Like, it's not... He doesn't really have to do anything other than that.
I disagree. I think he does more than that. I think he's very capable at net. He might not need to move forward to net like other people playing him in order to beat him, but he can do it, and he did it against Taylor Fritz. If he figures out how to do that more regularly in matches, then it becomes even more difficult to beat him on the surface.
It is innately funny that the player who just failed 2 doping tests and got his suspension overturned twice and got completely cleared. And we only found out about it like days before the tournament started, won the tournament. It's actually funny to me.
Okay.
And not saying that he is guilty or innocent or anything. As I said before, I don't have an opinion on that. I'm not qualified to make that judgment. It's just kind of funny.
I have nothing to say toward that. I just know that everybody in the sport has pretty much decided that he is completely innocent, except for Nick Kyrgios.
Right.
The thing about this men's tournament, once Djokovic went out and then Taylor Fritz did the business and took out that guy, then I was thinking to myself, wow, I can actually immerse myself in a men's event and just kind of enjoy it. And up until the mid-4th set of the semifinal with Tiafoe and Fritz, I was enjoying it. And then it ended. And that was it. That was it for my tournament.
Yeah, basically. I feel like we've seen Francis in this position before. I really felt like he had the match on his racket. He was the better player for most of the match. And a number of people jumped on Twitter and was like, oh, I knew. At that one point, he was totally gassed in the 4th set. Like, okay, 1 point totally gasses you forever. And I think it was a little more than just physical.
He hadn't even played 3 hours at that point.
Right.
And Francis said in press that he himself felt he was the better player up until that point, but mentally is where he struggled.
Right.
And we don't know, as lay people, the full correlation between having a mental episode in a professional sporting setting and the effects it has on your body.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're to believe what Francis said, that's what it was. You saw it. Like, your legs become heavier, your body, there's a disconnect between your mind and your body at that point, and it's so difficult to turn it around again.
Mm-hmm. And the 5th set was just one-way traffic. It was really depressing, and I just wanted to turn it off, honestly, because for most of the match, I had that hope. Like, I had that expectation that Francis was going to do it. And honestly, like, we've heard so much about American men's success at this major, he would have been the crowning achievement. Honestly. Like, the fans, okay, they're going to turn out for Fritz, but they're not going to get that excited like they would with Francis.
Nor did Taylor know how to use the crowd to his advantage in this match. Okay, so we have this final. We mentioned earlier that people only now just seem to realize that Taylor Fritz is a Nepo baby as well. They're trying to tag him as being a Macy's department store heir, which is not entirely factual.
Right.
Or even factual at all.
The company Mays Department Store that his family owned for generations was acquired by Macy's. Merged/acquired. But this is generations back. What's funny to me is that Taylor Fritz oozes old money to me. Like, I cannot believe that people are surprised. Because the information is out there if you go to Wikipedia. His middle name is Harry, for God's sake. If your middle name is Harry, you're old money. I don't make the rules.
Also, if you were to just put 10 tennis players in a lineup and say, pick out a Nepo baby, and Taylor Fritz was in that lineup, who'd you pick? Like, come on.
So this was the first time that an American man had reached any slam final since Andy Roddick did it in Wimbledon in 2009. The first time that an American reached the US Open final since Andy Roddick in 2006. And I just wanted to list the outstanding American women who have achieved the same feat since then. So the American women who've been in a slam final since 2009 Wimbledon: Serena Williams 19 times, Venus Williams 2 times, Sloane Stephens 2 times, Keys, Kennan twice, Brady, Collins, Goff twice, Pegula. That's a lot. Mm-hmm. I was actually tempted to read out every single instance, but I held back.
So you have them listed out here, but if you were to count them, it's 30 times.
Yeah.
On 30 occasions, a woman from the United States of America has made a slam final since Andy Roddick last did.
And the American women are doing just fine. It's always been about the men, about that drought. And right before the semifinal with Francis and Taylor, they did a little video package, and Patrick McEnroe got to pat himself on the back about his role at USTA player development in the 2010s and having worked with these guys, and, just a little congratulations to Patrick because this has finally come to fruition, right? Of course, we're not going to talk about the circumstances under which Patrick left the USTA.
Mm-hmm. Or the fact that Taylor Townsend was in the women's doubles semis, she was in the mixed doubles final, and none of that had anything to do with Patrick McEnroe, who presided over her during that same time.
Of course. As the number one junior, he decided to rip her funding shortly before the US Open because he felt she was overweight and out of shape. You can see that she has had a child, she's come back, she's fit, she's reaching semis and finals in doubles. Now she's a doubles slam winner. Her body is not a problem.
Her career high in singles is now.
So we don't know. That's why Patrick McEnroe left the USTA, but we do know that a lot of parents in the program were overjoyed when he left.
Okay, but also, we're talking about 18 years since a US man made the US Open final. And that's coming on the back of a stretch of the rest of tennis history, where it was not uncommon. Mm-hmm. There was a stretch, I believe, in the 90s and 2000s. I heard them talking about it today, where in that 10-year stretch of the 20 finalists, 12 of them were US men. So what you're telling me is that the stretch that we've lived through over the last 2 decades is one of incredible futility.
Was the least successful era.
In history. Right. In history. And so you want to now pat yourself on the back for this achievement, which seems pretty minor, frankly, compared to all the abject failure that's happened before. I would sit there and shut my mouth because I'm not letting people know that I was responsible for presiding over all that failure. Because that's the other way to look at it.
Well, there are also external factors, of course. The rest of the world kind of caught up, and there was the Big Three thing, or Big Four, who are all from Europe. There were other factors involved, of course, but throughout most of the 20th century, the US was trading Davis Cups with Great Britain and Australia. We had Gonzalez, Connors, McEnroe, Courier, Sampras, Agassi. It just went on through the decades.
Sure, but these players who are having success now have little to do with Patrick McEnroe. Mm-hmm. They may have been in the USTA player development program at one point, but they've since gone on to leave those programs to get different coaches. There are multiple coaches removed from that situation. They're 25, 26 years old now. Give me a break.
So we talked about one semi. The other semi, of course, was Sinner defeating Jack Draper in straight sets. This one was weird. It was humid, but I don't believe it was that warm, temperature-wise. But Jack Draper physically was going through it. And I have some sympathy because he throws up a lot, right? And I think this must be just a stress response. People deal with nerves differently. And I think because it wasn't that far into the match when he started throwing up, I don't think it was really physical. I don't know.
He threw up 3 times in this match. He also threw up in Australia on an outer court after winning that match in the early rounds. He said it in press afterward that he's a very anxious person to begin with, and that's what's happening here. Mm-hmm. That his body is just reacting in these moments of stress and anxiety that he doesn't have control over.
And I feel bad for him. I'm sure he's embarrassed. Nobody wants to be seen like that on TV. He threw up on the baseline and then tried to clean it up with his towel. And the umpire, Veljovic, was like, no, don't do that. We have people for that. And luckily, the US Open has not adopted the ATP rule where ball kids carry the towels, because that's just disgusting.
This semifinal had Sinner big mad, apparently. Based on how the quarterfinals played out, naturally, and the historical precedent is that this Sinner-Draper match should have been the night match. It should have been the second one because they had less rest than Tiafoe-Fritz. But you have this narrative. The first time that we're guaranteed to have a US man in the US Open final, you're going to put it in prime time. That's just the way the cookie crumbles.
I mean, really. I'm sorry. The US market is not turning out for Sinner versus Draper on prime time. the way it was a weird schedule, right? At noon was the women's doubles final, and then whenever after that was the first men's semifinal. And then, of course, Tiafoe and Fritz got the primetime 7 o'clock spot on Ash. And sure, Sinner is the number one player. He can be annoyed about the scheduling, but here he's not. That's not the draw.
Right, and you do not have the pull yet of a Djokovic, a Nadal, or a Federer.
Right.
It's just not the case yet. That second semifinal was the highlight. It was the highlight of the men's draw, really.
Yeah.
And Francis looked like he had it. It was so tragic. He won the first set 6-4 after going down 3-love, mind you. Francis was down 3-love in that first set, came back to win it 6-4, had a lapse at the end of the second set, allowed Fritz to take it 7-5, and then he went 2 sets to 1 up, winning the third set 6-4 again, and then that.
I know, like, it felt to me a little bit like Madison last year. I felt like she had it, and then Madison was really playing at her peak, and then couldn't do it against Sabalenka. And that was depressing to me. Francis, I don't know. I feel like he should be encouraged by this performance and by the way that he's really turned around his career over the past few weeks, months maybe.
At Wimbledon, for example, you say to Francis, you're going to make the US Open semifinals. I think he takes it, no problem. Mm-hmm. But he set forth this goal to really turn things around on hard courts, and he did. Had good results in DC, made the final in Cincinnati losing to Sinner, had a very competitive first set against Sinner in that match. And then you get to the US Open, you get to the semifinals, and you've only got Taylor Fritz in your way. That guy is out of the draw. Djokovic is out of the draw. Alcaraz is out of the draw. This is a huge opportunity, and you're 2 sets to 1 up on your home turf on a court that you love. And it must be incredibly disappointing, but at the same time, somebody in his camp, hopefully David Witt or Ayan or his multitudes of fans on the internet, can send him DMs to say, hey, chin up. Like, this is big picture, a step in the right direction. You're now a 2-time US Open semifinalist. A lot of people play in Francis's face. You know, and they looked at him.
They call him a clown.
They looked at him like he was lucky to make that one US Open semifinal, didn't expect him to do it again. They don't take him seriously. Maybe Francis has struggled with not taking himself seriously as well in the past, but that's not where we're at now. We're at a place where Francis is back in the top 20. He's a seriously accomplished tennis player now, especially on hard courts, and hopefully this can propel him forward.
Yeah, and he wasn't super demonstrative during this tournament. He was just a little bit more low-key, but from a business perspective, like, if Francis can break through anywhere, nobody is doing it like him. Like, he could be a superstar.
The rest of the men's matches in the second week, Fritz took out that guy. Amazing. 4 sets. The sustained futility of that guy in big moments, in big matches, on the sport's biggest stage.
If ever there were an opportunity, this was it.
I mean, he has that gold medal, okay.
Okay.
Tiafoe beat Dimitrov. This was another sad one because, I was mad that these two were playing each other to begin with.
Right.
2 of my faves. If there were 2 people I wanted to win this tournament at this stage, it would be those 2. And then Grigor had to retire.
Yeah, I would have been happy if they were the final. They were my 2 favorites left.
Draper beats Duminar in 3 sets. We got rumblings before the match that Duminar was not practicing that day, that he was not well physically. He had to withdraw at Wimbledon. He had to give that walkover. And you got the impression that he was maybe still dealing with the same issue. And then afterward, he's writing on the internet, if you all only knew everything I'd been through, only the real ones know. I'm like, well, babe, if you told us,
tell us.
If you told us, maybe I could have been a real one. I don't know, man. I don't know what to tell you.
How are we supposed to know?
That put Jack Draper in the semis, and then Sinner beat Medvedev in one of the most absurd matches you'll watch. It was the weirdest match of this tournament, probably. 6-2, 1-6, 6-1, 6-4. I think these two are just really tired of playing each other.
They have played a lot of times, and their trajectory is actually really similar to the early Venus-Serena rivalry. Venus reeled off their first 5 or 6 matches, and now Sinner has really turned the tide against him.
That's the comparison you're making?
Yeah, it's just a rivalry that I remember, you know.
On the doubles courts, Jelena Ostapenko is a major doubles winner for the first time. She and Kichenok defeat Mladenovic and Zhang 6-4, 6-3. They also reached the Australian Open final, where they lost to Shea and Mertens, as well as the Wimbledon quarterfinal. This is a team that's now a permanent doubles team. They've been playing together for a few years now, and they've reached the summit finally.
Kichenok said she was supposed to get married on Wednesday, this past Wednesday, and they actually had to play a semifinal. So they postponed the wedding. They are still planning on getting married. It was funny that she didn't, I guess she didn't think much of their chances in the doubles draw.
Mladenovic and Zhang ran through 3 top 5 seeded teams. Number 2, Shea Mertens. Number 5, Melikar Martinez and Perez. As well as number 3, Siniakova and Townsend, the Wimbledon champions.
Yeah, that was a tough one. Their semifinal, it felt like, there were just a few mistakes in that third set. Taylor made a few errors. Siniakova, you know how she can get, her head can take her. She gets mad.
Okay, there you go, using...
No, but it's very appropriate.
Okay.
Katka is obviously one of the great doubles players of her era, but sometimes her temper takes over, and it felt like the Townsend pairing was really good for her because Taylor was kind of able to calm her down and get her head back in. It was tight. It was just a hard one to watch. It was a very fun match though, and Mladenovic Zhang, their run was incredible. They beat. I tweeted this. I think it was they beat 5 of the 6 women who've won double slams this year, or 4 of the 5.
In mixed doubles, Sarah Irani and Vavasori beat Taylor Townsend and Donald Young. And I know you've asked this question many, many, many times before, and we still don't have a definitive answer. When will we be free?
Of Sarah Irani? Probably when she stops winning majors and gold medals.
At 37, why should she stop if she's winning hundreds of thousands of dollars in doubles?
Right. She's won.
She's also top 80 again after the
in
US
single.
Open.
See, I would like her to leave singles. Doubles, okay.
But
good for you.
Okay, but she's not even on your radar in singles. When is the last time you watched an Irani match?
I heard the grunt.
From where?
The television. By accident. But, I mean, Irani is 37 years old. She just won her first mixed double slam. She has all 4 slams in doubles. She has a gold medal. She has 3 Fed Cups. I mean, it's a really, really good career.
Unfortunately, we couldn't get the fairy tale ending for Donald Young's career. He hadn't played a singles match since last fall, almost a year. He came back at this tournament alongside Taylor Townsend to play one last event before calling it quits on his tennis career, as he is now a professional pickleball player.
Oh. Like Andre Agassi?
No.
Oh, is he not a...
No. This is the actual professional tour. Agassi does exhibitions.
Oh, they have an actual professional level?
I don't even know what to tell you, man. If you don't know this at this point.
That's how little I've paid attention.
Bouchard has been playing on it. That's what Jack Sock's doing, all those guys. Sam Querrey.
That's real?
It's real.
Oh, okay. I thought they just did
no
brand sponsorships.
It's a real tour.
Okay. In men's doubles, the Australian team of Purcell and Jordan Thompson beat Kravitz and Putz. This is Jordan Thompson's first major and Max Purcell's second.
They were beaten finalists at Wimbledon this year, and it was a grim moment for them. They were not pleased, much like Taylor Fritz was not pleased today. It's entirely natural for you to be unhappy when you lose those finals.
Right.
People expect you to be like, oh my God, yes, so happy to be here, or to be able to feign congratulations in a genuine, sincere way to your conqueror. I'd be mad as hell.
They're better than me. Moving on to some of the et ceteras outside of the actual tennis, where do you want to start? We have a long list here.
Let's start with the stuff that we can just kind of list off, get through really quickly, that don't need a whole lot of expansion.
Okay.
Players who played their final US Opens. I'm sure we're missing a couple. Some of them we don't even know yet that it's their last US Opens. But Shelby Rogers played her final tournament. She's retiring. Donald Young, we just said that. And then in the first week, we had Dominic Thiem and Diego Schwartzman both go out real early. Dominic Thiem and Diego still have a few more tournaments to play, but this was their final US Open. And what they got as a commemoration was this massive, giant framed collage of some of their best moments. Mm-hmm. And the thing was so huge that it was like 3/4 the size of Diego Schwartzman. It was so absurd. I honestly, I'd be so mad if I was him.
Right.
Because they have me stand up there holding it and it's drowning me out. I look ridiculous.
Dominic, of course, is a former champion here, and he never really got his ovation. There were no fans in 2020, and he was injured in 2021, and he did seem moved by the gesture.
Right, but again, a plaque.
Right.
Not even a plaque or something that looks like you've won something.
Well, he has a trophy.
It's just a frame. And where do you put that frame?
In the trophy room, I guess. On the wall. You have kit updates here. I guess maybe some kits that we didn't touch on.
Yeah. I really like Donna Vekic's kit. I thought it was a bit of a throwback, kind of old school looking, kind of a jersey blouse top. Like if you were...
Oh, yeah. It was strange.
And then a skirt. Red, white, and blue.
Mm-hmm. I did like it, but it was strange.
It was unusual. We didn't mention Frances's kit in the last episode. There are few things that Frances can wear that will look bad. Put it that way. But this one really stood out. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's also not dissimilar in cut or style to other things that he's worn before, but the color worked on him. Sloane Stephens, you blink and you missed it. Wow. Because she was out in the first round in both singles and doubles, but that red dress was outstanding. And how could we have not mentioned Coco Gauff? That kit was really good.
New Balance is the brand for her. They do a great job for her.
Fila had a very good tournament too. Emma Navarro's kit was good.
I don't really know. I wouldn't know. Speaking of Coco, the children running down into the first row while she was about to serve at 3-5 in the third set of her match.
This is so rude. Like, you're trying to hang on for your dear life in this match, and you see these little Grim Reapers coming down the aisles expecting you to lose.
Yeah.
I'd stop playing and tell him to get the fuck back up.
I would not sign a single autograph. But Coco is way better than
I would march right over there and deal with it.
First of all, they don't let them in. But this is truly a failure of parenting. How do you go in public and you allow your children to act like that?
So disrespectful. Apparently people were unable to watch the US Open again just like last year because there is a Disney issue yet again.
Now it's with DirecTV. Disney and DirecTV. Apparently it seems like contracts come up around this time. Right before, I guess, college football, during the US Open. And it happened last year. And I can't remember what it was. Spectrum and Disney, which owns ESPN, ABC, all those. Yeah, sorry, I can't relate because our duopoly in Canada gives us really, really good coverage.
I mean, now that you pay for TSN Plus.
Exactly. But the coverage is great. I can't complain about what we have paid for.
I know a lot of people listen to us from all over the world. This was a US problem.
Yeah.
Probably specifically maybe a Northeast problem. I don't know.
So I mentioned the kids running down. You had talked about the fact that they're letting people in between games rather than waiting for changeovers, and it did relieve the congestion on the grounds for you. You wanted to add something.
If you are in Ash in the 300 levels, do not buy a ticket near an entrance. Those stairwells where people come up, because the one time I was up there, I had to get up at least 40 times in one set because people kept coming and they come and they sit in the row in front of you because nobody's there. And then they're like, well, let me go try find my own seat. And the process repeats itself. Mm-hmm. So if you are in Ash, find where the entrances are and go away from that.
I have seen other people complain online about just people walking in between games. And it's just inconsiderate when you're trying to watch.
No, that's just how Ash is. There's no...
No, but on the outer courts as well.
Okay, well, what I'm saying is, the other part of it is, for example, court 17, where you can now walk in at the top parts and go sit down. While I said that probably helped with the congestion on the grounds and the overall flow and making it not feel as overwhelming as last year, the downside of that is people who are seated, a lot of people like to go to one match and watch the whole thing. People who are seated there, it's not an uninterrupted viewing situation like it was previously.
Right.
So there's really no one size fits all solution to these things, but I think generally speaking, it was an improvement this year with this new rule. It's always been the wild, wild west in Ash in the 300, so that was going to be the case regardless. But the way to mitigate that is to just not sit or buy your ticket by a stairwell.
Okay. The late night finishes, this was an issue in the first week, but along with record attendance, you see the official tournament accounts celebrating attendance, late night finishes, and why should this be something to celebrate, right? Why, as an athlete, are you expected to be your best self at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., then have to go to press, then have to cool down, and then go to bed?
We've seen this so many times, and it's always reported as something to be celebrated. And it's just gross. It's gross. It's unsafe to the players. Sabalenka tweeted the next day, said, it wasn't that bad. I got to bed by 3 a.m. Got a full 8 hours.
Woke up at 12.
Well,
I'm glad.
Great for you. Great for you, Aryna. But this is not what should be asked or expected of players. If I'm recalling correctly, the match that precipitated this whole thing was the Vekic Chinwen match. And on the face of it, it really shouldn't have been the case. Because the preceding match was Tiafoe and Popyrin, and that was only 4 sets. But the issue was the day session ran long. You had Rublev and Dimitrov that went 5 sets, and then you had Navarro and Coco Gauff going 3 sets. And at that point, they have to change over day session people to night session people. And it became a clear problem for organizers that this just took way too long. The night session was delayed. It didn't get started until well after it should have because of this one issue. They've got to find a way to figure that out.
Mm-hmm. It's regularly taking 90 minutes from the end of the day session to start the night session.
And this is partly why I was relaying on the last episode about how hellish entry was to the night session, just standing to even get inside the grounds. Not only are you waiting outside to get in, it took me about 40 minutes, the line was super long. When you get in, people are lining up already to get into Ash. But in that situation, the people in Ash have to come out. Mm-hmm. The sheer volume of people in that scenario is just difficult to even grasp. And so when they say, 1 million people, I think of that specific instance as one moment of many where it was way too many people. Because you really should not have 7 sets of tennis setting a record. Like that's wild.
The day session only has 2 matches. It's not long. Stacey Alistair, who is the tournament director, explained that there is a new policy. If the final match on Ash or Armstrong hasn't started by 11:15, the tournament referee has the discretion to move the match elsewhere. There are a lot of variables. Can they get a ball crew? Is there a broadcast team on this extra court? Do the players want to go to the other court? But they do have the option now. Courtney Nguyen, the WTA insider, reported that for Sabalenka, the players were asked. They went on around midnight in that 3rd round match. And I guess they had the grandstand ready, but there might have been rain in the forecast, so they just ended up continuing to play on Ash.
They waited to see how the 4th set would play out, which Popyrin was able to close out that match, and then they were able to take the court shortly afterward.
Speaking of Sabalenka, in the quarterfinals, her fitness coach Jason Stacey, the white guy with the goatee.
The one who wore the tiger tattoo on his head top yesterday.
He wore a hat with the logo for XXXY Athletics, who is a group that advocates for getting trans people out of sport, especially trans women out of women's sports. They had been banned from TikTok for hate speech. So, like, really nice people. Martina Navratilova, of course, shared this and said it was a great victory for Jason Stacy to wear this hat. A great victory for freedom and progressivism. This got, like, a little attention. It got internet attention. But for the next match, he wore that said, "Everyone watches women's tennis," which, sadly, these days is not incongruous with the previous message.
It could have had another meaning.
Right. And then in the final, he wore a temporary tattoo of a tiger on his bald head. And okay, anyway, like, that was too much attention on Jason Stacy for me.
There just seems to be always something
There is always
in this
something,
camp,
right?
You know,
it is something that is holding me back a little bit with Aryna.
Not a little bit for me.
No, I'm not going to blame her for the men in her camp. What really holds me back with her is that I feel like she takes a lot of opportunities to, like, dig at women's tennis, and just, I feel like she has to be goaded many, many times to say the right thing. And then eventually she does and gets credit for it. And I also think she takes a lot of opportunities to trash the WTA, and it just feels excessive.
Mm-hmm. She gets credited for speaking out for peace after winning the title.
How long did it take?
How long? Yeah. What we saw at this tournament too was the coaches wearing a lot of sponsors.
Oh,
a lot of patches, a lot of that. And that's what this hat was. I don't know if he was paid to wear this or not. It doesn't matter. The bigger picture here is we saw so many coaches wearing patches, branding, this, that, the other. And if I'm a prominent tennis player, and I know that my team, which consists of any number of people, we saw, what was that energy drink?
Lucky something?
Yeah, Lucky. Frances's team was wearing it. David Witt had, like, hat, t-shirt, scarf, watch, socks, all with the same branding on it.
Plus, like, a number of other patches.
Yeah. If I'm a top player and I know that my team is going to be visibly on TV, that is another part of the equation you have to pay attention to. And if you don't want it to be part of the equation, ban it. Tell them they can't.
I guess I
write it into your contracts, because you are the face of that team. I don't care. You cannot separate yourself from your coach in that situation, because they are representative of you, especially if somebody's making money for it.
Yeah.
Like, why should we be constantly asked to turn a blind eye or make excuses for people's bad decisions and hold nobody to account? Who is ultimately responsible? Should we just watch all these bad things happen and just be like, well, yeah, it's tennis. It is what it is. It happens. Like, what can you do? And then you go out there and you laugh and you kiki. You go have another spectacular Champions Trophy shoot. If it's one thing Sabalenka is going to do, she's gonna turn up for those photo shoots. And then all is forgotten until the next time.
Yeah.
You know, like, I struggle with that part of it. I think once you've been at the helm of your team and you're a top player for long enough, there's certain things that they just come with the territory. 2 more orders of business before we finish the episode. We're going to talk about the ESPN commentating mess, and also that segment we promised you from the last episode having to do with the lawsuit brought by that guy against Ben Rothenberg and Racket, and Racket's alleged refusal to continue supporting Ben Rothenberg financially in fighting it.
First, it appears that the ESPN commentators are paying more attention to pronunciations based on how players are recording their names on the WTA and ATP websites. A new pronunciation dropped for Bia.
And it's one that we will now be paying attention to. It's how this should work. Checks and balances. We try, sometimes we fail. We watch TV, we hear somebody pronounce it, we go check it. Oh yeah, that's probably how we should be doing it. And then it all gets better collectively. In this case, I'm watching the match, and all of a sudden everybody on the telecast, 4 different people are saying Haddad Maya, as opposed to what we've been saying previously, Haddad Maya. And when I hear it, I'm like, oh, of course, this makes perfect sense.
Of course. Like Brazilian Portuguese, they would say that.
It makes perfect sense. Silly, stupid me. But then we get Qinwen. And this is where it becomes nasty work. A Twitter user, Ratazana, tweets at ESPN-related people saying, just so you know, this is how Qinwen is pronounced, because everybody had been saying Qinwen. And this had pinged on my radar again earlier in the tournament, and I was about to tweet something, but then I went to Qinwen's website to see if she'd updated it, because I knew of this discrepancy, and saw that she was still saying Qinwen on her player pronunciation. And so, Chris Evert.
Firstly, let's say it's common for people who have names that they perceive would be difficult for Westerners to say to either simplify it or use a different name. And it seems like in this instance, Qinwen just decided, okay, they've messed up my name so many times, let's pick something they can actually pronounce. But in Mandarin, her name would be pronounced Qinwen. One
of the most quote-unquote egregious examples of this is Canton Moutet, right?
Yeah.
His player profile says...
He's French.
Corentin Moutet.
And it's the way he delivers it is almost sarcastic.
These are just two examples, but it happens. Chris Evert quote tweets Ratazana and says, we actually asked her directly and she gave us that pronunciation ! Okay.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
In that case, you did your homework.
Okay.
But
Andy Roddick, out of nowhere, unasked, unprompted, inserts himself, replying to Chrissy saying, yes, but did you ask Ratazana on Twitter before committing to what Qinwen told you to call her? Well, this is emblematic of some of the ugliest sides of Americans.
Yeah.
It is so deeply dark-sided and ignorant and rooted in arrogance. That's how it reads to me.
When I saw it, I remembered, oh, right, we've seen that side of him before. We've seen Andy be just mean for no good reason. He wasn't even involved. It's just mean. And he doesn't actually know the Twitter user is from China.
Right.
Like, they would know.
And also, it doesn't involve you. In this instance, Ratazana was not being disrespectful. They were not being snarky. It was just a matter of fact, way of going about it. And you've decided yet again to punch down.
But Andy is out here, he engages with everybody. He engages with trolls, the most bad faith people he is boosting with his profile. And so it seems at this point he cannot distinguish between trolls and just regular people.
No, I think part of it too is that he genuinely sees himself as an outsider. He's branding himself with his podcast as being an independent voice, one of, if not the only independent voice in tennis.
The most independent voice in tennis media. That is a quote.
Meanwhile, he is hosting these shows with John Wortham.
Right. One of the longest standing tennis journalists in the game. Works for Tennis Channel.
The podcast is being boosted by all these known entities in tennis, promoted by them. You, by the mere fact of being Andy Roddick, necessarily makes you an insider.
Right.
You're conflating, quote unquote, telling it like it is and being unfiltered, but that's not the same as being independent. That's a huge distinction. And when you are out here dunking on people for sport in this specific manner, by being ignorant about cultures and pronunciations, and furthermore, if I am Chris Evert or Andy Roddick, and I'm being told by Qinwen that I should be pronouncing her name Qinwen, and so many people are saying, actually, this is how it's pronounced in Mandarin, does it not click to you that maybe Qinwen is telling me to pronounce it this way because she thinks that you're incapable of doing it the right way? And so when I experience this all the time as an immigrant, and I'm sensitive to it as an immigrant. I have a very Anglo name, so it's not an issue for me.
Right.
But I meet a lot of people from all over the world, and they tell me their name, and they say, oh, just call me so-and-so. And I'm like, well, first, how do you pronounce it? I would like to try, if that's okay with you. And also try and get a gauge of whether they're just trying to make it easier for me. Mm-hmm. Because for me, that's not enough.
Well, and also maybe they don't want to go through this whole song and dance every time. And,
right? There are many reasons for it. Mm-hmm. But no, for all of you to be congregating on the internet, to be dunking on people because you've got it right. Finally, after years of saying Mukava.
Well, listen, that's
Mukava,
the thing,
Mukava,
right?
Mookie.
Chrissy retweeted Andy with all these laughing emojis. Oh, I know you. I know you aren't getting in on this, kikiing about how good you are at pronunciations, Miss Paolini. We are a month removed from Paolini. Like, you don't get to congratulate yourself now because after many, many years, you discovered that the WTA has audio pronunciations for every player. Like, are you serious?
Let's be clear here. A producer insisted that we're going to have a uniform pronunciation of names.
And again, we don't get them all right. We try. Sometimes we fail. But we're not here on the internet kikiing about native speakers correcting us and saying, no, you're stupid, we're right. It's so unsavory.
It is so mean-spirited.
That's the thing. Is that you have like tens or hundreds of thousands of followers and you've decided to use your platform to like bring attention to this user. I think there's a disconnect. There's a misunderstanding of power here and what punching up, punching down is. It's very disappointing.
A misunderstanding or a total lack of understanding?
Well, isn't that the same thing?
No, not necessarily. Misunderstanding means that you may be willing to engage with it to try and understand it.
Oh, no, I think it's a lack of acknowledgement that power dynamics exist if you are famous and connected and wealthy.
Mm-hmm. And then we have the Nick Kyrgios situation. All fortnight, we've had lots of people so frustrated by this development. ESPN has taken him in. He's doing these cutaway segments in between sets, giving his opinion on what's going on in the match. And for most of us, if we feel that way, we just mute it, right? It's like, oh my God,
I don't watch it.
Where's the remote? Mm-hmm. Mute immediately. Go play on your phone for a minute or two.
Yeah.
And then, when did this happen? Last night?
Yes, this was yesterday.
This was Saturday night or sometime Saturday. Kyrgios responds to a picture of him with Anna Kalinskaya, his former girlfriend, who is now the girlfriend of Jannik Sinner, world number 1, current Australian Open and US Open champion. And he writes, second serve. Mm-hmm. And what he's implying here, and these are crude words, but this is, make no mistake what he's implying, Kalinskaya is Sinner's sloppy second.
That's exactly what he means.
That's what he means.
And the full context is that somebody tweeted him this picture to goad him, to provoke him. And that's also gross. Like, let's just say that. Mm-hmm. These whole trading of pictures with Jannik and Anna as some kind of victory, like, that's gross. She is not an object to fight over. Nick said, I was provoked, and if you don't want a response, don't do that. Like, you're not a full adult with willpower and the ability to make critical choices. You're also employed by ESPN now, at least on a contract basis.
Mm-hmm. This is almost a decade after he did the first known spurt of misogyny.
I mean, one of the most disgusting things you'll hear, humiliating Donna Vekic in absentia as a way to emasculate another man.
Right.
Wawrinka. So he's using this woman, slut-shaming her, exposing her in front of the entire world to demoralize his opponent. Disgusting. And since then, in the decades since then, he's continued to tweet misogynistic things. He doesn't value women's tennis, but now we're paying him to commentate on women's tennis, and he cosplays as someone who really respects it. Mm-hmm. And he actually he cosplays pretty convincingly if you don't know who he is. But he has not stopped in that entire time. He's not stopped behaving on Twitter like a red-pilled misogynist Andrew Tate fan.
Right. Because the pushback we hear and see all the time is, oh, but he's so good at his job. He's so refreshing. He does such a good job of approximating what a tennis commentator should be.
Right. And do you know what this is? This is older people assuming that this is what young people want. They're saying, wow, this guy, he's so, he's a straight talker. He's young. He brings eyeballs to the sport. We'd be stupid not to employ him. Those people are not connected to young people. I will say, I gotta say this, because this has really been pissing me off. There was this whole very determined effort over the summer among commentators, journalists, to rehabilitate Nick's image. After he was doing commentary for Wimbledon, John Wertheim was one of them,
Yes.
who tweeted, and the tweet is still up, you can go look at it, about how great he is, how refreshing he is. And just today, he tweeted about Nick's misogyny. But you were part of the chorus that said, wow, he's such a great addition to tennis.
But it's not tweeting about his misogyny in a condemning way.
No, it's just like, here's something that happened.
What it bears reading. This is what he said. Nick Kyrgios once made a misogynistic, wildly inappropriate comment about a WTA player, referencing the Vekic situation, drew the anger of her ATP player boyfriend, his coach, and much of the locker room, but didn't face real consequence, dismissed as it was as youthful indiscretion. That was 2015. He's 29 now. This doesn't even...
But that's it.
It doesn't even address what happened this time.
No.
And so why is he in a position for this to be an issue now, John?
This is why it's really annoying me, because on July 14th, he tweeted, you know who has already won this tournament? Nick Kyrgios, calling this for BBC. A fear in itself, and nailing it. Observant, efficient with words, lacking the self-referential flab that can plague other broadcasts. And this was in the context of a number of other media personalities tweeting about how great Nick is at this job. And it almost felt coordinated. But now, now you're tweeting in September, he's been a misogynist all these years. So it's frustrating to me, because I felt like the media circled the wagons around him. And now he's done this thing again. I mean, he has never stopped, right? Engaging with Andrew Tate, calling people names. He's never stopped. But the media in tennis decided to forget about that because he was competent at this job.
Interesting to me that the way that John's tweet was worded this time around separated himself from it.
Of course. But, I mean, delete the other tweet then.
Yeah. Or say, I was wrong. I participated in this. This shouldn't have happened. And look where we are. Right.
But it speaks to the number of conflicts embedded in the sport.
The other issue here, if you recall when Sinner's doping case came out, nobody was more vocal in opposition and doubt and critique of Sinner than Nick Kyrgios. And we said it at the time, don't discount that Sinner's current girlfriend is Kyrgios' ex, and that he's not being motivated by that.
And we have seen him use women as objects to hurl at other men before.
And so this happens. It is the playbook. This is who he is. And he tweets this, woe is me, so sorry, Taylor Fritz, head up champ, what a couple of weeks tweet.
Right.
After the final today, nothing to say about Sinner. But if you are taking your job seriously, right?
But what is the job? That's, he has to decide, because on air he presents himself as a very reasonable, measured commentator, an analyst. And then on Twitter, he's still engaging with the most disgusting misogynistic content. And then yesterday, Caroline Garcia, I mean, bless her, the most oblivious fucking person in the world, dropped her podcast with Nick Kyrgios. Caroline has been on this anti-bullying campaign, anti-harassment campaign. I'm speaking directly to you. Be fucking serious. Are you for real?
Well, you have to be speaking directly to Naomi Osaka as well.
Exactly.
At this point.
And honestly, I was not really, Naomi for me is in timeout. I'm not rooting for her right now. I don't care when she loses. Her continued support for Nick Kyrgios is a black mark for me. And her agency is in some ways set up for promoting Nick.
It's not just support. It's platforming. That's what's happening. He's being platformed undeservedly, time and again, by people in tennis who have been made aware and should know better, but show time and time and again that they don't care. Just like yesterday when this story broke, ESPN still ran him out for the women's final.
Right. Now, he was not doing mid-set commentary for the men's today. And I don't know why that was, but he was yesterday.
I'm told he did something before the match today, or what have you. I don't know.
But Naomi's agency, which she co-owns with her agent Stuart, created this podcast called Good Trouble for Nick. And good trouble implies some sort of moral force for good, right? Some kind of civil disobedience. What is the moral for, what's the trailblazing here? She played mixed doubles with him in this little kiki before the US Open. And it's very clear that she likes him personally and also supports him in business. So yeah, I judge that hard.
In more bad news,
Alexander Zverev has sued Ben Rothenberg personally for the stories that he wrote about the allegations coming from Zverev's ex-girlfriend, Olya Sharipova. A little background is that the first story was published by Racket, and it was always intended to be in 2 parts. The second part was published by Slate. And these were detailing allegations of intimate partner violence by Zverev against his ex-girlfriend, Olya. Germany has very, very different defamation laws than the US and Canada. In Germany, the plaintiff does not even need to prove that a story is defamatory, only that there was insufficient evidence to justify the personal impact. So it's sort of this confrontation of personal privacy and freedom of speech we're dealing with. In the US, in order for something to be ruled defamatory, you do have to prove that it was untrue and that it was malicious.
so why this story becomes newsworthy now is we got this Washington Post article written by Laura Wagner, formerly of Deadspin, and she's delineating the entire story, giving the backdrop, the context of the stories that were written, why Ben was being sued. The issue now is, allegedly, Racket Magazine and Caitlin Thompson have decided to stop supporting Ben financially in fighting this lawsuit. And according to Ben, this has to do with the break in leadership that happened sometime...
I think earlier this year?
Earlier this year or
Yeah.
last year, somewhere around that time, where there were 2 co-founders, David Shaftel and Caitlin Thompson, differences of opinion in how the magazine should be run going forward, the direction, etc. They broke apart. David then went to go form his own entity,
Right. The second serve.
and it's now published its first issue as a magazine.
There was fallout at the time. Craig Shapiro, who at the time was very closely aligned, at least publicly, with the Racket brand, he left. Gary Nathan, who was writing the Racket newsletter, also left. We have no insider knowledge of what happened at Racket, just to get that out there. I know we've had Caitlin on the show before. Back, I think, in 2016, we promoted like Racket's launch.
We were paid.
Yeah, but I don't know what went on with Racket, so I have no opinion on that.
We know as much as you do. And so...
But the nut graph here, like
The what?
the nut graph, it's like a journalist term.
Oh,
The gist is that Ben is being sued personally for this story. Racket, allegedly because like a failure of how the lawsuit was served, Racket is no longer being sued. It's just Ben.
and for a while, Racket was still continuing to support Ben financially, even though it was just him named as the defendant.
Right. He was a freelancer. He was not an employee of Racket. And then he was a freelancer with Slate, filing a different story. Racket has no legal obligation to support him, but it's very, very unusual to withdraw support in the middle of a legal process. So based on the most recent ruling, Ben is forbidden from repeating any of the allegations against Zverev, or, quote, perpetuating the story in any way, or he could technically go to prison. Ben is now appealing, and this is what the GoFundMe is for, is to fund the legal fees associated with the appeal. If he loses, he might have to pay Zverev like 20,000 euro.
Estimated. Have we mentioned the GoFundMe before?
Oh,
I think you
I don't
just
know.
dropped that for the
so-
first time.
So Ben launched this GoFundMe kind of in coordination with the Washington Post story, saying, I'm being sued by this tennis player, I'm appealing, and I'm asking for your help. If I win the appeal, I won't have to pay anything, and I'll donate it to this domestic violence charity called House of Ruth in Washington, D.C.
And the reason why I need the money now is because Racket and Caitlin no longer support me.
Right.
I feel like we were very circuitous in getting to that point.
So it was unusual that Racket pulled its support in the middle of the legal process. No one from Racket responded to the Washington Post story, so we don't have an official version from Racket.
Because people are like, well, this is only one side of the story.
Right,
Well,
but they chose not to comment.
what's the other side? I'd like to hear it.
I mean, I would like to hear it. Ben will go back to court in December.
Ben alleges in the description for his GoFundMe that the reason, as told to him by Caitlin, why the funding was stopped was because he went to go write for David Shaftel for the new publication, and she didn't like that. And that also the Zverev story, one of the byproducts of that is that she lost sponsorship for one of her parties because that would-be sponsor also sponsored Zverev.
That's what was reported. We haven't heard the racket's side of things.
We haven't heard a rebuttal specifically. Something I also want to point out from this whole story is another example of how conflicts of interest work in tennis. So while racket was in its flourishing, burgeoning heyday, you had a lot of people who wanted to be associated with it. Mm-hmm. One of them, chief among them, was Craig Shapiro. To my viewpoint as an outsider looking at what was happening, right? And then when this split happened, he was one of the sources quoted in that article. Ad nauseum, went on for days. And then at this tournament, Craig Shapiro is very vocal on Twitter critiquing Rennae Stubbs, who remains a big part of Racket and their podcast. I think it's now called the Rennae Stubbs podcast, yes. But it's still affiliated with Racket. And so now that he's made that break, he now has all this smoke for Rennae Stubbs on Twitter saying she's being inappropriate in how she's speaking to Brad Gilbert after that Coco Gauff match. And I don't know if this is the reason why, but this is why conflicts of interest are bad. Because I'm left to wonder why.
Right. Would you have had a different opinion a year ago about the same situation? Yeah. I think in the bigger picture, beyond the kind of the racket drama and these two warring ex-partners, the bigger picture is that in some countries, tennis players can sue reporters personally. Journalism is in such a terrible state. Most reporters don't even work permanently for a publication. The major papers are not funding tennis reporters anymore. So many of these journalists are on their own. And they are rigorous because if they fuck up, if they print something that's not true, they can get sued personally, right? Their entire livelihood could disappear. This is their career. And it's frustrating to me, as someone who grew up in the US with very strong defamation laws, where it's really difficult to prove defamation, that, you said something about a German and they decided to hold this case in Berlin, which is famously stringent.
As opposed to other cities in Germany.
Exactly.
Because he's not from Berlin.
No. And you don't even, again, he does not even need to prove what he said was untrue. What Ben said was untrue. He just has to prove that it was damaging enough with insufficient evidence.
Also, this is 20,000 pounds? This is chump change for him to grind an axe.
Right.
It's not inconceivable that he could bring further suits frivolously just to make somebody's life miserable.
Yeah.
The good news of it is that Ben's GoFundMe has soared.
Yes.
Within 24 hours, he raised the goal, which was $22,000 and now it sits at over $36,000.
Yeah, a number of media figures supported, a number of people that I knew from my previous job in Canada.
A lot of people seem to get that this is important for, on a micro level, the survival of journalistic integrity. So while it's exceeded the goal, you can still contribute. People are still contributing even within the hour. We have. And we also say that we've always believed Olia. We have been reporting on this from the start. And if you've found our coverage of it useful, it owes almost exclusively to the work that Ben did. So if you are able, we ask that you support him as well. Even though the goal has been reached, I think a big statement can still be made if a sizable donation is made to the House of Ruth. Mm-hmm. Because Ben is not, from his words, not keeping any of this money. If he's made to pay for legal costs, then this GoFundMe will cover that, and whatever is left over will go to a donation. And if he's exonerated, is that the right word?
I guess.
If he doesn't have to pay anything.
Or he wins the appeal.
If that guy has to pay for his legal costs, then all the funds collected will be then donated to House of Ruth.
Mm-hmm. All right, that's that. that's the US Open recap.
Slam season is done. You need to get your ass in gear with this research episode that
me?
we're doing. Yeah, I have an agenda. You haven't looked at it.
Okay.
I'm putting
Yeah.
this on air so that you are held accountable.
In the fall, I'm just saying we're gonna relax the kind of covering the tournament schedule and do a bit of digging into the history of tennis again.
Okay. Thank you for listening. My name is Jonathan. You can find me on Twitter at tennis_John.
And I'm James at ElliotJMR.
2 L's, 2 T's. This is the Body Serve, and everything Body Serve related can be found at linktree.com/thebodyserve. Thank you for listening.
Till next time.
Thank you very much.